everyone. Welcome to another episode of Choral Living. Tonight we have another special guest with us. His name is Peter Panagore. Welcome to the channel. Now, Peter, he's got a list full of credentials besides just being a regular father, husband, grandfather. He's had some near-death experiences. He's ordained pastor. You've been a best-selling author. You've got your own YouTube channel called Not Church, and some very fascinating stuff. So I thought the best way to kind of get into this, Peter, would be one, just to say, hey, welcome, and two, tell us how this journey began.
Hi guys. Hi James. Hey Justin. My dad met my mom. Sorry. No, but I will say, I believe you guys are in Canada, are you not?
Yes.
Yes, my mom was born in Canada.
Right.
So just saying, my family across the border, hey there.
Hey.
Anyway, so...
Sorry.
Yeah, you guys are only like 2 hours from me. Like the border is like maybe two and a half hours. We're pretty close.
Yeah.
So how did I get to where I am? Sometimes people are born with a predisposition towards capacity for mathematics. Like, this kid in first grade who's suddenly at a third grade level. Or somebody's really good at art, or there's a propensity, maybe it's a talent, maybe it's DNA thing. I seem to have been born with a tendency toward mysticism. And I'm going to define mysticism before we get any further so that you know where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
And mysticism was defined by William James and the varieties of religious experience at the turn of the last century with 4 characteristics. One is it happens to you, it's passive, you don't make it happen. 2, it's transient, it has a beginning and an end. 3, it's noetic, it leaves an understanding inside yourself, noetic understanding, noetic knowledge that is ineffable, you can't talk about it. And because the words are inadequate, it can't describe it. We have no concepts that are functional for description. And I like to use the example of a visitation from the dead. So like half the population has had a visitation from the dead. And how do I know this? Because last year at the International Association for Near-Death Studies conference, there was a researcher, this is a science organization, that came up with these figures and a project that 46% of the people surveyed had a visitation from the dead. So when somebody's grieving, somebody you love dies, and you're grieving, and then there's a visitation in a dream or in a waking state, and then your grief changes moving forward, like a big change. Suddenly you know that this person that you love, who's missing in your life and not coming back, isn't really dead. And you know this because they come to visit you, and there's some kind of energy transference, some kind of data transference that's always related to love. It's forgiveness or welcome or joy or I'm okay. It always relates to love. So that kind of experience, which is common, fits into the 4 characteristics of William James. And it leaves behind a message for you in your grief that you don't know. You may not be a believer in afterlife, but you know your dead loved one is still alive. And nobody can convince you otherwise. And if you bring it up at a cocktail party, or on the subway with somebody, you sound like a kook because you can't say it. Oh, my brother came to visit me and transmitted to me this love that permeated my being and changed my grief so that as much as I miss him, I know that he's still alive. That sounds crazy to most people unless they've had the experience.
Yeah.
Mysticism is about experience. Everything we're going to tell you tonight is about experience. And so I seem to have been born with a tendency toward mysticism. My first mystical experience happened when I was 5. Then there was one at 6. Then I had one with psychedelics in high school. And then I had a 2 when I was in college while backpacking on the Appalachian Trail. And each one of these cases, I was pulled out of myself and saw an aspect of the divine that left me as a kind of a different kid. I was always kind of a different kid than everybody else.
Yeah.
A little more. It doesn't mean that I didn't get into scrapes and trouble and have, get bullied and fight back and all the stuff that kids do. But I had this, my parents tell me, friends tell me, I had this extra sort of compassion that just seemed to be there. That, I was plenty of trouble, just to be sure. I was plenty of trouble and caused havoc for my family and for myself, just like every kid does. So that's kind of the setup. But I didn't understand any of those experiences until I died. I had them. They changed my life. But it wasn't until I died the first time that looking back, I had a new frame for them, a new lens for them. And when I was in college, the year before I died, literally a year before I died, it was the March before I died, I was backpacking on the Appalachian Trail in Massachusetts, in New England, in the United States. And it was 8 inches of snow on the ground, and I had these two out-of-body experiences in which I was carried into the divine self by an energetic intelligence that took me and carried and I know that all this stuff sounds woo-woo to some people, but I still had a form, but it was made of light, and I was carried into the divine, and I was told that I became a column of fire through and through, and told that I would not be consumed, and I was given a handful of gold dust, and the breath blew it away, and the voice that has no sound said, "This is yours, my gift to you, now give it away." And so I was like, what is this? I had no idea. And I was backpacking with one of my best friends, who's still a buddy of mine, who's an atheist. So, you don't talk about God to atheists if you want to keep them as your friends. And so I didn't tell him. And we're still in touch. I talked to him last week. He lives in Italy. So a year later, so this is the setup. So a year later, one more piece. When I was 14 years old, my sister ran away. And from our point of view, she vanished. And there were broken parts of my family resulted, primarily among my parents. And it became a grieving situation that's never closed because there's no end to it. And so it created a lot of pressure in my family. So in my junior year of college, I decided, I'm out of here. And so I was going to quit school. I'm like, I'm leaving home. I'm done. My parents talked me into not quitting school, which I'm thankful for. But I decided to go on national student exchange so I could get away from my family. And I lived outside of Boston. And so, which is where the school was, outside of Boston. And so I went to Montana State University in Bozeman, which is on the other side of the country, and it's south of Alberta. And it is where Glacier National Park is and a whole bunch of other national parks in the United States. And I went there to get away from my family, to go skiing, to go backpacking. I was on the National Ski Patrol. I got a volunteer gig at the local mountain in Bozeman. And then I did a bunch of backpacking when I was out there, Yellowstone, Glacier, and some other parks you guys may or may not know about. And then come springtime, I went home for Christmas and it was awful. I just did not want to be there. And it was just all this tension. And so come springtime, come March, I decided I'm not going home. A bunch of my friends, they're all going to like Laguna Beach and Hawaii, and I'm like, A, I don't have the money for that, and B, I want to go do some adventure. So I went to the outing club, and I found, which I was a member of, and I found this guy who was just certified as a lead climber on ice. And so we got together, he had this trip planned to go up to British Columbia and Alberta to do like 8 days snow caving into Mount Assiniboine off of the Icefields Parkway. And then with like 70 pound packs on our backs. And then one day of ice climbing. And I'd never ice climbed before, but I'd done quite a bit of rock climbing. When I was at school in undergrad, the year before, like 3 years before that, I started technical climbing. And I loved it. And kind of a mountain goat myself. I have good balance, I'm coordinated, all that kind of stuff. So we had complementary skills. I'd done a lot of winter camping too. So I'd been a Boy Scout since I was 11, and I stopped when I was 18, primarily so I'd go camping.
Yeah.
And so winter was my element, and I geared up as best I could, and he geared up, and off we went, and we did this. Oh, we had complementary skills. So I was first aid in wilderness, and I was competent in the woods and in the wilderness, and he was too. And so we spent these 8 days, and when we first got out into the wilderness in BC, the very first night we had a big problem because we didn't bring our tent with us. On our map we had a cabin. There was a cabin. We were skiing across this lake to this cabin, and we had a shovel so that we could dig snow caves. But we planned our trip: cabin to snow cave to cabin, and kind of thing, right? So, but when we got there to the cabin, we couldn't find the thing, and it's getting dark and it's cold. The temperature's dropping. It's really cold, and the wind's blowing, and the prevailing wind had blown all the snow across the lake on the other side. So on our side of the lake, there might have been 6 or 8 inches of snow, even in the woods. And so it's getting dark, and we're triangulating, we're getting nervous. It's our first night out. We had done a couple of days together in another area, so we knew each other. And I'm skiing along, and suddenly my ski gets caught under this thing, and it turns out to be the cabin that had burned down. Oh. So the cabin's burned down, and I'm stuck under a log, and there's no snow to dig a snow cave, and we don't know what to do. We ski back to the lake, and there's this overflow of ice, this ice ledge that's above the lake, just enough, like if we scooch underneath in our sleeping bags and pads, like little worms, our noses and bellies could touch the ice. And so we chopped off a bunch of ice pieces, and we made a little igloo, and we crawled inside this thing and spent the night there as the whole thing, the lake's booming, and the ice is cracking, and we didn't sleep at all. So this is the very first night. But the thing we learned about each other that first night is that in a desperate situation, not desperate, in a difficult situation, neither of us lost our heads. We both were very steady and calm. And that turned out to be the truth for the whole trip. And that played a big part in our survival. So we ski back in after 8 days in this adventure, avalanche areas and all sorts of fun stuff. We weren't in an avalanche, but we saw one. That happened like the day before or something.
Ominous.
Ominous. Oh yeah, it was. But it was also great too. I mean, yeah, but it was all ominous, ill-fated, for sure. And it got worse and worse and worse. Like, I don't know if you read the book, but it gets worse and worse and worse. So we ski over, we get out, we ski across the lake, we drive up to Jasper, we get a bunch of food. We're late to getting back towards Cirrus Mountain, which is where we're going to climb on this place called Weeping Wall, Upper Weeping Wall, Lower Weeping Wall. We're on Lower Weeping Wall on the ice. Well, that's where our intent was. So we drive back from Jasper. It's further than we think. And we get to the warden's cabin just north of, I'm not sure if you guys call them wardens or not, I don't remember. But it's
like park ranger type thing?
Park ranger, like a park ranger, right. So we get to the park ranger's cabin, it's dark. And we knock on his door and we convince him, we talk him into it, that we'll cook him dinner and we'll clean up if he lets us sleep with him in the cabin that night. So we don't have to set up a tent and find a place. So he agrees, and we do that. And in the morning, we sign the log saying where we're going, and we go down to the climb, which is, 10 miles away, something like that. I don't remember. But it's situated so that the Icefields Parkway, and then on the west side is the Saskatchewan River, which is right next to it. And it's in a valley. And then on the east side of the valley is Cirrus Mountain. And it's maybe, 70, 100 yards in to the climb. It's really close. So we park in the parking lot, and we hike in with all our gear, and we get there, and there are a bunch of other teams already on the ice. We're the last team to show up. And so they're already climbing, and some people are higher up than others. And as we're unloading our gear, I'm not even looking. I hear somebody yell, "Falling!" And I look up, and a guy falls. and he falls, 10, 15, 20 feet. He's on a line, he's on a harness, but he swings down, he's like, whoosh, And, wherever and then he swings at the bottom a little bit and he bounces and everybody's holding their breath. We're all like,
What?
And after a moment he says, I'm okay. And he continues climbing. We're all like, oh my God, like super adrenaline rush. And so we unload all our gear, and I'm going to emphasize that Tim's a certified lead climber because, and I'm not, it's my first time on ice, but I talked to a bunch of ice climbers back in Bozeman, and the gear that I didn't own and couldn't get at the outdoor club, I had to borrow because I couldn't afford to buy it all. So I borrowed, I had crampons, and my boots were these like 1968 lace-up leather ski boots because you need something super stiff. And which I think I actually had when I was a kid skiing. And anyway, so I had those with crampons and an ice axe and an ice hammer. And Tim had all the gear. He had all the harnesses, he had all the screws, all the ropes, he owned all that stuff. So we knew that you could climb with a hammer in kind of an emergency situation. This is a 500 or 600 foot climb. But I was 21 years old, I just turned 21. And I thought I was immortal, and I thought I was a hero, Superman, Mm-hmm. And so we decided to make this climb with an axe and a hammer. And the axe, you can set the axe on the ice and let go and relax. But the hammer, you got to hang on to this thing. You can't. Once it's set, you can't like dangle on it. So half of my resting time was reduced for my arms, which meant my upper body burned out really fast, twice as fast as all the other climbers. So by the time we even got part way up the climb, we already knew that we were in trouble. And if you've been backpacking or hiking and there's a thunderstorm coming in or the weather turns bad, you can turn around and go back down the trail again. But you can't do that ice climb. You have to complete the climb and take the rappels. You can't turn around and go back. It's just the way it is. And so we had to continue to climb. And so we knew that we were slow, and I sped as fast as I could, but there's nothing I could do about it. Tim was very understanding. But as we neared the top, and the sun was going down, an hour or two before this even happened, we knew that this has gone to a bad situation. All winter, so part of the training that I was getting that particular winter at the ski patrol was for frostbite and hypothermia, because the temperature, you know what it's like in Canada. Yeah. Montana's like that too. It gets really, really cold. It gets 50 below with the wind chill factor in the mountains. Yeah. That's not brutal. Crazy. And so it's brutal. So we've been pulling people off the mountain with frostbite and hypothermia and that kind of stuff. Not terrible, all right? That, you don't look good. You got a little nip on your nose. Got to get you off the mountain. You're losing your ability to think straight. Let's get you down below, kind of thing. And so I knew that we were it was bad. Sun went down. We got to the top. Sun went down. Temperature dropped. 30 degrees, something drastic. And hypothermia started immediately because we weren't dressed for cold. We were dressed for the cold of the day. It's a day climb. Just to, let people know it's a day climb. No other teams were carrying, sleeping bags and gear to spend the night. Nobody was spending the night. And we had drunk all our water, and we had eaten all our food.
What are sorry to interrupt. I'm just curious.
No, it's cool. Good.
I'm just curious as to what's the the onset of hypothermia feel like? What starts to occur?
All of my muscles, you got major muscles and minor muscles in your body, they all started expanding and contracting in an irregular pattern all at once. Shivering, okay, it's a shiver, right? I'm shivering, but it's like my jaw's clattering like a cartoon. I have to consciously keep my tongue out of the way of my teeth, but my tongue has muscles in it, and it's a quiver. Everything's a quiver. Everything's like, and I feel like if I could just see myself, like my face would have been distorting all over the place. Every muscle was twitching.
That's awful. You're making me feel cold right now. I feel cold now.
Because you're like shaking, and now you're like, your body is telling you, the body was telling us, this is bad. Yeah. This is right. You're not in control now. It's what it was. I couldn't stop it. Sun goes down, a million zillion incredibly colorful stars come out. There's so much starlight up there that you can see when there's no moon. And there were no clouds and there was no moon. And so we could see in the dark. Not great, but we could see. And Tim hauled up the rope. It was a double line, 150-foot double line. So 300 feet of rope. And he hauled it up and it became a knot because he was hauling up too fast and we were scared. We were petrified. We're both being super cool about it because we know that if you lose your head, you lose your life.
No room for drama in that situation. Like, there's no room for silliness. So, right?
Nope, that'll kill you that fast.
Yeah.
And so we talked about, through our clattering jaws, what are we going to do as he's pulling up the rope? And we discussed snuggling together up against the mountain, but neither of us were warm. We were already, because it's a wet sport. This is in the days before the first polypropylene shirt had just, became available in the stores, and I had one on. But otherwise, I'm wearing wool. I had wool and a silicone sprayed outer coat, leather chaps with wool mittens on the inside, a helmet and a hat, and glacier goggles. I had glacier glasses and for the light. But not that I needed them at night. So we realized that if we stayed there, we were going to die. That's the first conclusion we reached. Stay here, we're definitely going to die. And so the only choice was, well, if we're going to definitely die, let's at least die trying to get out of here, which meant making 3 rappels, including traversing in the dark with hypothermia and onsetting frostbite. So Tim got this big, huge knot. And I'm one of my complementary skills is I was a rope guy. So I had my merit badges and knot tying and all this kind of stuff. So I'm a rope guy, and so I untangle this. I take off my mittens, and if I start to get frostbite on my fingers, I still have all of them. They got bloody bruised, but I still have them all, and some worse than others. But I untangled this rope, and that was the onset of the frostbite on my hands. And meanwhile, our feet are freezing, and our faces are freezing, and we get the rope undone, and this takes time. I don't know how long. I'm not looking. I didn't even own a watch at the time. I still don't wear watches, but.
At this point, Peter, were you maybe this is kind of an obvious question, but you were entering the process of dying soon. With all this going on, so does that mean that your brain was producing maybe some of the chemicals that start to happen when you're in the process of dying? I'm having a hard time articulating
not yet.
What I'm saying. Not yet.
Not yet. I'm still in the early stages of what if I were on the ground and could get inside a house at this stage of hypothermia. It wouldn't have been hard to heat me back up.
Okay. Yeah.
So that it progresses through the night and it gets worse and worse, and there's symptoms. More symptoms are added, and they all compound each other. And it's actually a fairly peaceful process. I mean, it's not. It's painful because it feels like you're on. Your hands are on fire. Your face is on. It feels like somebody's taking a hot iron. And you put your hand on it, it hurts, but it's actually kind of peaceful.
I almost drowned as a kid, and I remember remarking similar thing. You'd think panic would be out of control, but I actually recall a sense of peace coming over me, and actually imagining I think this might be it, and then somebody saved me. But
yeah, exactly. And I think that's not an uncommon experience. I guess it depends on the type of death, too.
Yeah.
So
I would imagine, yeah.
So we get down. Tim ropes up. He's in front of me. Ties the rope around his waist. I take the rope. I tie it around my waist. We have some distance between us, I was using my axe on my left hand as we make this traverse across this narrow ledge in the dark, and Tim's leading the way because he's the lead climber, and we're on ice with our click-clack with the crampons, and we get over to the first rappel, and it's this tree that's sticking out of the mountain, I don't know, 6 inches, 8 inches in diameter, Well, I don't know how many centimeters that is.
6.
6. We'll go with whatever you want. So we started at this point not making rational choices. And so what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to take a piece of nylon webbing, which is a woven tube that lays flat, that ties in a square knot that is used in climbing. You're supposed to take one of these webbing pieces that's tied in a knot and wrap it around the tree, and then take the rope and stick it through the nylon webbing, so that when you pull the rope down, it doesn't stick to the tree. It just slides right out. But we're like, I remember talking with Tim, and it costs money. This webbing costs money. I don't want to lose this webbing. I want to keep this webbing. And I was like, yeah, it's fine. And
in shock, going into shock or something like.
Yeah, well, it was just dumb. But we made a series of poor choices. So as the night goes on, it doesn't always move in our favor. So we make this rappel down, and Tim goes first, I go second. At the bottom of the rappel, there's an overhang, so that you're free falling down. So there's some distance where we were off the rock. So now we're on ice. I think we're on ice and rock at that point. And then we land down in this, I don't know, a snow field that's the size of a box, 2 box trucks, the small box trucks, like the platform area in the back of those 2. And the snow is maybe up to our knees, and we get down to this, and by this point now we're starting to lose our coordination. It's very difficult to talk because our jaws it's hard to move my jaw, hard to speak. The shivers have reduced, but the kind of locking of muscles, things are just stopping working. And so the brain starts slowing down, making bad choices, and we're falling in the snow. And we've both grown up. I grew up in the snow. I know how to walk in snow, but I couldn't. I was tripping all over the place. Plus, I was exhausted, and I hadn't eaten, and there's no water. And you can suck on snow, but it doesn't really replenish you, and it cools you down because you're eating something that's just been frozen.
Yeah.
So it's not the best choice always, even if it's the only choice.
Especially when you're freezing.
Yeah, exactly. You have this ice cold slushy. So the rope is hanging there, and we go over to the rope, and Tim goes over the rope. Tim went over to the rope, and he pulled on it, and it's stuck. And now it's frozen to the tree because the rope got wet during the day, and now the temperature's dropped. The tree was wet, and now we surmised that there was an ice connection on this rough bark. And because of the way the line was laying on the bark, because a line doesn't sit on the tree at 6 inches, it goes down to the bottom where it makes the connection. So there's a little more surface area, basically. Yeah. So the rope is frozen to the tree. With both of our weights yanking on this thing, we can't get it loose. It is stuck. So we don't know what to do. We know we're going to die. The situation is now much more desperate. Tim has gear with him, and he's got this very thin line. It's like that thin, but it's super strong. You could pull a car with it. It's so if it's in neutral. Yeah. And so he ties these 2 hitches, one to each side of the line, called a Persic hitch. And what they do is they're friction, so you can slide them up. And when you pull on them, you create tension. The friction stops them from sliding down. And he puts these 2 huge loops on the end of these hitches, steps into one with his left foot, steps into the other with his right foot. And I take the rope and I wrapped it around myself, and I was lying in the snow, and I made it as taut as possible, because he's going to go back up over this overhang and climb back up, reascend this rope with these hitches. Oh. And so that's the only choice we had. So being brave and feeling responsible, that was a big part of this. We talked about this a long time. He felt he's the leader, he's the one who had to go. So he begins his ascent, and I'm lying in the snow with my face in the snow. So and snow actually doesn't really go down below 0 degrees centigrade. Snow kind of stays at a consistent temperature. So it's an insulator, which is why you could stay in a snow cave. So I'm actually a little bit better off lying in the snow than I am standing up. And it's still cold. And so he begins to ascend, and after some period of time, I'm kind of in the face in the snow looking out at the mountains across, or behind the river. He yells, falling, and the rope jerks free, and I kind of roll out of the way as fast as I can, because somehow the rope jerked, and he lost his grip on the rope, and he just fell. And so I roll out of the way. He half lands on me, but the snow's deep, and he's unhurt, and the rope's free. So we pull the rope down.
Well, at least you got that.
Yeah, exactly. So we're elated now. We're like, yes. And as this all happens, now this is sparsely populated territory. No cars are going by all night long. Only one car went by all night. And then at this point, earlier in the evening, another vehicle comes down the highway, or the parkway, and we see it, and it pulls into the parking lot, and it faces us, and it flashes its lights. And we jump up and down, and we wave, and we surmise it's the park ranger. We didn't sign out like all the other teams. He came looking for us, whatever time of night it was. I don't know. The moon had risen by now. So the moon is up like a 3/4 moon. So we're silhouetted against the rock. He can see us as we jump and we wave. And he flashes his light. And now we're like, we got the rope. We got the park ranger. Somebody knows we're here. That was really a huge thing. Somebody knows we're here. Yeah. We knew that we signed into the log, but that's different than actually having a human being there for you. So we took a lot of courage from that. And we made the next traverse. And this time we're off the ice altogether, and we're on rock. And there's this corner. So we come into it this way, and then there's this corner. And in this corner is where the iron pin and the ring is to put the rope through. And there's a ledge that goes over to it. And then it's all kind of craggy. So Tim rappels down this craggy ledge, and at the bottom of the rappel, he goes off to the left around this corner, like that. And now he's on a ledge like the size of a conference table. And there are 2 iron pins epoxied in the mountain with rings on them, carabiners, webbing, and another carabiner that you want the person to my left, person to the right, and we click into each other. This is the training area. This is where you learn to climb. So it has safety, permanent safety in place. So we're safe for the first time from falling all night. I come down second. I take one end of the line. I click in with the carabiner. I take one end of the line, and I tied it off to my harness, which was not a store-purchased harness, because I don't even know if they had them then. But it was made out of webbing. And so I click it to the harness, and the webbing is blue. I'll keep seeing blue webbing in my head. It was all blue. And so then I take this. I should skip back and say, Tim set all the ice screws as we went up, and I cleaned them all off. So he set all the ice screws as we climbed for safety, and my job was to come up behind him and relying on the screw above me for safety, and Tim having me on belay, I take the screws out. So I've got all these clangy screws hanging off of my side. I think we split them up. I think he had half of them, I had half of them. So there's a lot of, they're not heavy, but there's a lot of them. And there's carabiners.
Just awkward, clanking around.
Yeah, clanking around. I get stuff hanging off of me, and so I tie this line off to my harness, and I take and it's called the bitter end. So the end of a rope is called the bitter end. So I tied off one bitter end to me, I took the other bitter end, and I tossed it out around that corner, like trying to get the wide arc on it. And by this point, hypothermia, my feet are like ice blocks you buy at the convenience store. Not the ice cubes, but the block. My feet are no longer cold. They don't hurt anymore. There's not burning. I can't feel them. And so I'm like, when I'm walking, I'm kind of stepping with intent. I should talk, before I get to this part, I should talk about my mental state, because I was terrified. I all night long, I've had this drive develop inside me that was beyond language. I stopped thinking about surviving and just began surviving. I don't know how to say that. I wasn't like processing, I've got to survive. I was processing, got to step, got to tie this knot.
I could be wrong, but it almost seems like aspects of the ego maybe start to fall off, and it's like a base survival takes over. Like there's, like, going back to what we said earlier, like any silliness, any drama, kind of starts to go away, and it's like there's only thoughts of survival. What next?
Yeah, exactly. Nobody. So, Justin, in all the years I've been telling this story, nobody has ever said that to me. That is exactly what was going on. It was very animalistic. Oh, that you've been there?
Well, just
Yeah.
not to that degree, obviously at all. But I know, like I used to be involved with I was a volunteer fireman, and us even outside of that, just crazy adventures with my buddies, or even in construction, working really late in a Canadian winter. It's like I can get an idea of what you're talking about.
Yes, exactly. The self disappears, and all you have is what is next.
Let's just get this done.
Yeah, it's like being in the flow, only more intensively.
Yeah.
And I felt like I went through the mammalian survival part of my brain, and I got to the reptilian survival part, like that early dinosaur thing, where you're just like.
You can't act like a human anymore. It's like, or if you are, you're acting like the truest human that's ever existed, like beyond, niceties.
Like the original human.
Yeah.
That is. So it dug. So skipping ahead, because of that, it dug a huge well inside of me of survival. I found that I had determination and drive that I never knew I had. That I was capable of doing. A human being was capable of having such an original self experience of survival. So, and I kept my terror at bay because of it. My terror wouldn't rise up over my survival. My fear was not as strong as my drive to live. And all through the night, neither of us lost our heads. We just were super steady. We talked as little as possible because every time we spoke, we felt our energy go away. And we knew that, so not only we had hypothermia and frostbite, we had a limited amount of energy for survival, which played into the whole hypothermia thing, because when we ran out of energy, there was nothing to heat us.
Yeah.
So it was all kind of dying.
So you have to pretty much stockpile everything, every ounce has to be there.
Every ounce. No extraneous talk. No wasted motion. Every motion was intentional. And what the thing about ice climbing or climbing in general is it's a hyper-focus type of thing. You have to be completely where you are when you're there. You can't be off thinking about anything else. And sometimes in climbing, I've been in situations, free climbing, where you have to make a move, or if you don't make this move, you're either going to have to stay where you are, or if you don't do it correctly, your life's at risk. And it could only be a 15-foot fall, but it's still a 15-foot fall in a rock.
Yeah.
So you've got to make sure everything is exactly where you're supposed to. And I know that climbing sounds crazy to people. I hear it all the time. You were ice climbing? What were you doing? What are you thinking?
We were both arborists.
Yeah, we were both arborists.
You're out your ropes and climb. Oh, yeah. Right.
It is crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy.
I got out of that career as fast as possible.
Right. Well, I should say I have not ice climbed since.
Wow.
I have taken my adventure elsewhere.
Yeah.
I still love adventure, but it's different now. Anyway, so.
And I was a bad arborist. I wasn't even a good one.
What did you say?
I said I wasn't even a good arborist. I was like, I don't know. I did not take on to that well.
Yeah.
Because it's hard. Like, I can imagine a little bit of kind of what you're talking about, because with tree climbing or arborist career, on the way up the tree, it was like you couldn't pause. You couldn't stop and hang out at all because it's just wasted energy. So it's like you're constantly moving and having to think very fast. And again, I don't even think I was very good at all.
And you're also super aware of how something bad could happen so easily.
Yeah.
Like so.
Plus, you have a chainsaw in your hand, right?
Hanging off your belt.
Right. And sometimes I bet you're hanging one-handed with one-handed chainsaw.
Yeah.
It sucked.
Or
It
it's-
sucked.
Wow.
But
Yeah,
some
it's-
people like it. I know lifers.
we
That,
both don't do it anymore.
yeah, I know people that stuck with that forever, man. They loved it. But
I had one, and we had somebody come, a young fella I knew growing up, who played Little League Baseball in my son's team. He came as an arborist, and I marveled at him. I was like, this kid is going to do this for the rest of his life.
it's an amazing workout.
Yeah.
It's like a full body, amazing workout.
Oh yeah, he's super fit.
And I'm sure the mountain climbing is probably a full body workout, every muscle at all times.
All times.
Yeah. So you're there. You're on the side of the cliff.
So we're there, and the rope is tossed off in this one motion, and I pulled the rope the first time on the first pull, and it stuck. It was like I got about 3 or 4 inches of slack, and now it's jammed, and it's jammed somewhere up around the corner in the dark. And because of the way that the corner turns, the line was laying on the edge of the rock. You know how you snap a line? You can snap a hose, snap a line and kind of move it. Like there was no snapping beyond the corner because there was friction there. So I snapped the line. It couldn't help. And every time I pulled on it, it felt like it got tighter and didn't until this point where it just didn't move. It was just not going anywhere. And so it's tied to me, and I have a little bit of extra slack. And Tim is off to my left, and we discussed untying it from me because he couldn't reach over and pull it with me. It was too far away without taking off his harness, taking off his safety. So we talked about untying it and like seeing if we could stretch it out. But then if we did that, we have frozen hands, and our coordination is terrible. So tying this, it's not as like, okay, I took off my gloves and I tied this knot. That was an effort. Like my fingers weren't moving. I had to focus on this knot and make this thing with like full body motion. And I was afraid, we were afraid that if I untied it, I dropped it, that was it. Because we had half a rope at that point, and half a rope is better than no rope at all. So the more I pulled on it, the more energy I expended, the quicker death was coming for me. But I couldn't get it free. Nothing I could do. And now things get worse. And so I came to the conclusion that I wasn't going to get it free. It's like, okay, that's not going to happen. And when I decided that, I started thinking about my family. I looked out, there was this beautiful mountain across the parkway, and I could see all the stars and the river, and it was extraordinarily beautiful. It's extraordinarily beautiful there. Like one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my life. And I went back in 2016 and saw it again for a second time, and it is incredible. So, but this peace came over me as I decided that this is it. I'm not going to get out of this situation. There's no way I can do this. I can't fix this problem. And I started thinking about my parents, and about my sister who had vanished, and my brother, and my other sister, and I had an adopted sister at this point, and I thought, well, I guess they're going to lose me, we accepted it. It's like the peace came, and then I unzipped my coat because I got hot. I felt like this is what it felt like. I felt like all of the blood rushed from my legs, my extremities, and my arms into my core. So from like my belly, south of my belly button up to my neck here. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't really need my feet, do I? I really need my heart and my lungs right now. That's what's going to keep me alive. If I lose a hand, I need my heart and my lungs. And so irrationally, I was hot, so I unzipped my coat. It was only a nylon. Well, it wasn't nylon. It was this material called 60/40. It might have been nylon and cotton or something. I don't know exactly what it was. And I unzipped it, but it was a shell, and it protected me from the wind. And I unzipped it, and I decided to let myself cool off. And Tim saw me do this, and we hadn't been talking because we're trying to conserve our energy. And he told me, zip your coat back up. Don't, you're making a mistake. And I didn't care. I was like, I don't care. I'm hot. I'm sweating. I'm going to. And then I started falling asleep, and I would fall asleep in this way that I would be that everybody would love to fall asleep is in a flash. Put your head down on the pillow and you're out. And so I would be, like my eyes would close, I could feel it coming and my eyes would close, but I'd lose consciousness and I would collapse. I'd be in darkness, unaware that I was in darkness. Darkness would come and I was unconscious and sleep, and I would then collapse and smack on the rock and wake up. And this happened a couple of times, 3 times, I don't know, 5 times, some number of times. And I stood back up again and I'd pull on the rope. And then this last time I stood up, I had tunnel vision. So my peripheral vision became this big black circle on the outside that collapsed very rapidly. And I remember looking around with it as it came into this very narrowing focus of blackness. And I was confused. I had never seen such a thing before. I didn't know what was going on. And when it went to blackness, I saw it going to blackness. I was looking at the mountain right in front of me. And as it went to blackness, I thought to myself, I'm going to fall and collapse. And again, and then it went out, I'm going to fall and collapse and not be awake. But it went out and I was still awake. And I didn't feel myself collapse. I was like conscious. I wasn't like conscious. I was conscious, but I couldn't feel my body anymore. I wondered what was going on, why I was awake. How could I be asleep and awake at the same time? I could still think what was going on. I didn't really understand or know. And at this point, in front of me, if I had a front, became darkness. But this darkness had it extended outside of my vision. It was darkness that I could see the depth of. And I could see the depth of it, especially when this pinprick of light appeared at a galactic distance from me. One single star in this field of black, and it popped into existence, and it rushed toward me at a phenomenal speed. It was a galaxy away from me, and it was on top of me in moments. And as it came to me, it sort of filled my vision with this light the closer it got to me. And it communicated to me telepathically, no language. So everything I say from now on is in metaphor. Everything I say now is metaphor, because none of the things on earth are at all like what I experienced. There are no things here, thinglessness. But this entity came. You could call it an energy ball. You could call it an angel of light. You could call it a consciousness. But it rushed toward me. And it had a superpositioning. It's not the first time I've experienced this angelic type of form with the superpositioning, both in the divine self and an individual entity. So it's both of these things, and it's communicating to me, and it says to me without language, I'm taking you. And I say back to it with my thought, no, you're not. I'm not going anywhere. I don't know what's going on. And I put up all of this willpower, this survival thing that I had all night long. It saved me to this point, and it was nothing. It was like a thin piece of onion paper that this entity just reached through and plucked me out of myself. And I lost all of I lost all of my agency. I lost all of my power. I had no strength at all, and it was intelligence. I can't tell you how intelligent. Way far beyond my understanding. Power beyond my capacity to grasp. And I was enfolded inside of it, kind of enveloped in it, and it carried me off. And we went back on the trajectory it came from. And then I had these 2 points of view. I had this point of view. I can see myself inside of this from an outside point of view, but I had no form in this outside point of view. Inside this entity, I still had like a physical body, shaped like a physical body, but not made of molecules or cells, made of light or energy. And it's sort of shaped like me, and I still have me in me, and I'm looking out through the eyes of me, and I still have like eyes, and I'm lying in, it's like those cartoons where they show you sitting on a cloud in heaven. I'm kind of like sitting in a cloud inside of this, only I have no strength left. And it's pouring intellect. It's like it's showing me its intelligence. It's showing me its power. It's showing me its strength, and it's giving me comfort. I'm not uncomfortable. I'm very comfortable. And so I have these 2 points of view, and I get swooped back up the way that I came. And maybe it's a tunnel, maybe it's not. I'm inside of this entity.
Was it like seducing's the wrong word, but was it like coaxing you to join with it?
It was singing sweet nothings in my ear on a pillow at night.
So it's kind of like seducing.
Kind of like seducing.
Which just moves out to sex.
Right, only better than sex. This whole thing, okay, this was the best orgasms in the history of humanity. All the history of humanity, of everybody, all combined into one orgasm is nothing in comparison to the other side. It's like, yes, but it's capital S and a capital O.
Capital O.
Capital O, exactly. So that's funny. So I get carried off in this thing, and I have these 2 points of views, and then at some point, it's like people talk about the tunnel, but it went back on the trajectory that it had come from, and I was inside this thing, and this vast darkness, but it had a route. It had a path. And then it got to the edge of this darkness. And at the edge of this darkness where I had first seen it, I'm not really sure what happened. I can't really understand this transition that occurred. I either popped out of it, or it expanded into something else, or both these things. I don't really know exactly what happened. But suddenly I no longer have this light body that looks in the shape of Peter, a 21-year-old Peter. I'm instead like an orb of energetic consciousness. And I'm not made of molecules, and I'm not made of electrons, and this isn't a waveform. This is something that I use those words to describe it, but it's no thing. I was in a place of no thingness. There was nothing here, and I was nothing, no thing. But I was sort of contained in my consciousness, and without my brain, I could think faster than I'd ever thought before. And I wasn't thinking in language. I was just thinking about where I was. And where I was this infinity that I could see in every direction simultaneously. And in particular, I could see almost to the beginning of infinity. But the beginning of infinity, the origin of infinity, was an infinity away from me. I could see an incredible distance, and I understood the size and the vastness of this space, the size of the universe, but I couldn't, and I knew it had an origin, I knew it had an original thing to it, but it was beyond my vision, infinity. I couldn't grasp it.
Well,
I couldn't
because you were
understand.
still sort of finite. Like, even though you were experiencing infinity, there was a part of you that was still finite.
Right,
Because
exactly.
it was an identity.
I still had an identity, exactly. But my identity was no longer Peter. My identity was, oh, this is myself. Peter was not myself. Peter never was me. This has always been me. This is who I am. And my thinking and my identity and my seeing and my senses, 500 senses, my sensing of my environment and of myself, well, it was unlike anything I'd ever remembered experiencing in a physical form.
Did you feel like you were merging with this environment?
No, I was still, that came later. And I'm talking about later, but this is timelessness. And so all time exists there. Forward, backwards, inverted, inside out. The universe is running in the other direction, all that stuff. It's all like this eternal now of all time and no time. And so I tell it in a sequence, but I made up the sequence. It's all kind of all at once. And I might have been dead physically for a second, a minute, 30 minutes. I have no idea. But this took a long time. I was there for an extended period. And I am this energy that is in this void, in this eternal darkness that is also simultaneously illuminated. So if you're in a super dark room, you go in a dark room, you pull down all the room blackening shades, you shut off the lights, you close the door, and if you're standing there, it's so dark you don't see anything. So it was that dark, but it was also not that dark. So it's paradoxical. The whole place is paradoxical. I can see toward infinity, but it's also super dark.
Because it's nothing. Because it's nothingness.
Because it's nothingness, right? And
that thing about time that you mentioned too, I just wanted to, because I was curious about how time worked in this space that you were describing. You can, time is, what is it? It's relative, right? Like you can, as a human, with psychedelics you can experience it, but that thing about perceiving time differently, where the mind can actually experience like months or even a lifetime in internally, but to everyone else that's got regular typical waking experience, it can be like a momentary. Like that happens a lot with salvia divinorum. I think when people take that, it's like they'll come back sometimes and be like, I had a whole nother life. I just lived a whole life, and it's like 4 minutes or something that they were going, maybe 15.
So what kind of wisdom does that produce in a person?
Yeah, and it says a lot of it, just like how what the brain's capable of, how many thoughts the brain can actually condense into a certain space given your, varying consciousness, like whatever, varying states of consciousness.
It is about consciousness. That's what this is all about. And how a consciousness inhabits our bodies. I'll come to that at some point in this if we have enough time. So I'm this consciousness in this nothingness, and I'm remembering myself. This is my true self. I know this is me. I never was this other thing. And then the light appears to me. The light suddenly appears like a waterfall, a wall like Niagara Falls. Just this huge wall of light that has this flow to it, and it's a million zillion septillion colors. It's all the colors of all the stars that I saw that night and a million more, and it's all sparkly and it's all white. So it's colored and white at the same time, as if I'm looking at a prism. I'm seeing the white light and the color all occupying the same space. So, which is
cool.
So I was just thinking that's sort of superpositioning again. I'd never thought about that the light and the color were occupied. I never said it that way, but that's what I was experiencing. And it's solid. It's got flow to it, but it's got a solid surface. But I can also see through the surface at the same time. I can see it's a solid surface. I can see all the colors, so the colors extend and the white light extends, and it's translucent that I can see into it, and then it's transparent. It has another side to it. And I can see through this entire flow of water into a darkness into which I'm being invited, like a tunnel. And so it's the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And all I want to do is touch it. I just want to be, I want to go, I have a compulsion to go toward it. And so I reach toward it with my self and my energetic self. And as I touch this, it flows into me. And then all these things happen at once. I hear the origin of my soul self, my consciousness, being spoken into being. It's not a word. It's not like, it doesn't have letters in it. It is an expression of the divine self that makes my soul exist. And I saw the origin of the birth of my soul, the birth of my consciousness, eons and eons and eons ago. And I saw myself as like an electron that is superpositioned. I'm a single, or a photon. I'm a photon, and in front of me, I see a gigaplex of photons, and it's an energetic field of the divine self, of which I am exactly the same as all the photons. I'm a single photon of all these photons, and I'm outside of it, and I'm also connected to it. and I am being created. And meanwhile, I hear, I am creator, I make you, you are creature, sort of language. And so I am this thing, and I am also separate from it. I am finite from infinity. And then I see I see the length of my soul. I see all of my size as a consciousness and all these other lives I had lived but they were all simultaneously existing. I was in all of those lives as I was looking at them. And there was sort of like a sequence to them, but from my point of view, they were timeless, all at once. And I got to look inside two of them, and one of them is human, and one of them was not. I don't know what the other one was. I had no reference for it.
Right.
And as this is all happening at the same time, where I then experienced my human self, Peter, all of the suffering that I gave away. And so I go into a hell. So all of this is happening. I see myself as a creature. I see myself as pre-existent. I see myself as many lives. And I also see myself as Peter. I experience Peter and all of the pain I gave away to every single person in my life, from their point of view, inside of them, as I gave it to them. So I feel all of their emotions and their chemistry, and it's brutal. I feel I am, and juxtaposed to that, I also feel inside of me. So these are two simultaneous things. I'm experiencing all these people's pain that I gave to them. I'm experiencing all of the reasons and emotional decisions, the emotions, decisions, and reasons for causing their pain. And my judgment of myself was guilty. I did these things. And I caused so much pain because I was experiencing the hurt I gave them. And it was overwhelming. It was a sequence of all of the pain I gave away. And it was juxtaposed. I wasn't judged. God did not judge me. And I should say, I was raised Roman Catholic and Greek Orthodox. So I have these mix of faith traditions in my consciousness as I go into this. And so I go through this hell of my own making, and I judge myself guilty of the pain that I caused. It wasn't like I was being, oh, this is the bad thing you did, and this is the bad thing you did, you bad boy. It was more like, this is who you are. This is what you did. And the voice was saying to me, meanwhile, I'm inside of this entity. Its entity is inside of me. It's right next to me, and it's all of infinity. So it's got all these different layers to itself. And I can't see it outside myself, but I hear it inside myself saying, I'm creator, you're my creature, this is how I made you, I call you into being, I have always called you into being, I'm still calling you into being. So my original self, as it was called into being, is still being called into being in the same moment, because it's timeless. So there's always this presence. And as this is happening to me, I'm hearing love inside of me. And I'm seeing this infinite nature of unconditional love. And as this is, and the voice is saying to me, I was with you and in you and experienced all these things with you. I am in with and experience all these emotions inside of every person that you hurt. I am the experience. I am the experiencer. And the divine is saying this to me. I experienced this with you. And so this is pain that I already know. I know you as you are, and I love you as I made you, is the message. I love you, I love you, I love you. I have always loved you. I loved you when you were doing all these things. I love you now. I loved you before then. I loved you since the moment I called you into being as a consciousness. My love is eternal and constantly flowing. And that love is full of forgiveness. And as I heard this echoing, so I had this comparison of infinite love and my human brokenness. And that's how the judgment was like, this is so wonderful and I'm such a little worm. But as I listened to it, it was sort of through the lens of all the love that I had ever given away in life, that I heard the voice speak to me. And as it was telling me that I had done all these things and it loved me anyway, it also showed me that all of humanity has a radical equality of brokenness. And so in comparison to infinite purity and unlimitedness, everything else that's a thing is limited. And in order to have existence, and a limited thing has to have existence, it has to be broken by nature. And so all humanity
like a mathematical equation or something,
like a mathematical equation, right? If this, then that. And so if there's existence, the that is that you get with it is this brokenness, because it's a reduction of the purity. It's a reduction of the unlimited nature. And so it's okay, the voice was saying, I know this about all of you. This is no, if you can't live without this thing, and I love you as you are. And so there's this equality of human, there's no sin greater or lesser than any other sin. That's it, not because on a human scale, yes, we could, heinous murder of, that we have a lot in the United States with all the shootings that we have these days, these heinous crimes of bloody murder, we judge them and we imprison the people if we can. But in the divine self, from the point of unlimitedness, that's just a portion of brokenness. So as I came to understand my place in humanity, which is exactly like everybody else, in comparison to the unlimited nature of the one I now call the beloved, I listened to the voice of it and turned toward it, and as I turned toward it, I was flooded. Like, as soon as I stopped looking at myself and my own, judging myself, as soon as I listened to the voice of the divine and turned toward this love was always present. It had always been present. It's the nature of the divine. It was the nature of my being created. And there was all this forgiveness for all this pain that I caused. And using a biblical illusion, I was a grain of wheat that the chaff was burned off of. And so I became, you can't take the gold with you. You can't bring your stuff through the pearly gates. All that kind of mythology. I couldn't take myself with me. There was no room for me. No room for my pain. No room for my suffering. And all of that suffering, all of that pain went away in an instant. It was gone. And not only it was gone like gone but not forgotten, it was gone and forgotten, as if it had never existed. And this infill came to me, this flood inside of me that expanded me like a balloon, like a cosmic balloon. And it was this combination. I summarize it in one word, love. But that is a multifaceted word that includes a whole lot of words. Joy, beauty, purity, wellness, wholeness, healing, understanding, knowledge, awe, adoration, love, beauty, excess, welcome, fullness, desire, the 99 names of Islam, of God in Islam, that whole list, and a whole lot more of aspects of truth, of the divine self that is beyond explanation or understanding. And it infilled me and brought me to the brink of obliteration of my identity. So of my separate identity. And I got to this place where it was almost, I don't want to say painful, but one more drop of it, and I would have been like that guy in Monty Python's Now for Something Completely Different.
The guy that
eats the mint and he blows up. It would have been like that, only it would have not been bad. It would have been back into the original self. Completely different. It would have been, and now,
Monty Python.
Yeah. I was trying to figure out a way to weave that in, and I was like, oh, I could use that. Anyway, so I was filled with this oneness of being, and I had this unitive experience of so much love but not infinite. I still didn't become the infinite or fall back into it. I still had some kind of separation from it, even though there was this unitive state where it was all of these things that flowed into me became me. Maybe I've never said that clearly before. They were, all this love was me. And then at some point I shrunk back down again. I shrunk back down again. And I said to the divine, am I dead? And the voice said, yes, you're dead. And I said, well, I can't really come right now because my parents are going to lose another child. And because I could still see, now I can see backwards into my life. And I could see my parents. And I know that my sister's gone. And the voice is like, come home, it's time for you to come home, it's welcome. This is welcome. It's your time. And I say, my parents, and they need me. And in that instant, I am swept through heaven, through this infinity, to the edge of the creation of our universe, where there's like this Higgs boson field where energy becomes matter sort of place. And I am still in heaven, but I am pushed outside this field where I can see our entire universe. I see our entire universe, and I'm looking at all of it all at once. And I'm seeing all of it individually, but I'm also seeing beyond our universe. There are like universes upon universes upon universes, before universes, long before other universes, just like this almost infinity of other universes, and beyond that is the divine self, even greater than all the universes combined.
Insane.
And as I'm watching this, and it's all simultaneous, I see all of our galaxies, my vision swoops down through all of our galaxies, to our galaxy, to Earth, inside our solar system, and I see Earth like a hologram, and on this hologram are 7 billion people in live time. So I'm actually looking at the live Earth, only I can see through the live Earth, and I can see every individual person. I'm not like looking at James and then at Justin, and I'm seeing everybody all at once, 7 billion people. And I see them doing everything. They're living their lives. There's ships at sea, there's airplanes in the sky, there's babies being born, there's wars going on, there's murder and lovemaking, all these things going on, all the people doing stuff. Half the earth is sleeping, half the earth's in darkness, and inside of every single person is this golden light, this golden, like gold, like this fleck of gold inside of every single person that is self-illuminated. And nobody can see it, because between them all, there is this foam that covers the entire earth. I see the foam, I see the light, but they can't see the light inside each other. Everybody's blind to it. But in this moment, I'm still seeing this infinity toward infinity of all these universes, and the voice says to me, but it echoes across all these universes. It originates beyond all these universes, and it echoes across and through it all, right through all of the people. And as I'm watching all of the scene, it says to me, in the way that I love you now, and this love was the size of the universe. It was so expansive. There's nothing I could do that will change this infinite love that is particular to me. I am the most beloved that there ever was, and every single person is just like that. So there's this particularity to this love that is infinite for me in particular, but the same particularity, the same specialness applies to every single person I could see, and that's everybody. Everybody is beloved. The entire universe is beloved. All the universes are beloved. There's so much love beyond all of this. The whole thing is created out of love. And because of this love, all was well, is well, and will be well in time, because of eternity exists inside of time. And when you leave time, you enter into eternity. And so it's the pre-existent state of self. And so then I see this truth about myself, this truth about every living person, this truth about all the universes, all the matter in all the universes, and all the galaxies. And then I see my parents' faces. And so I'm still looking at Earth, and their faces come apparent to me, and I see all of their suffering like an accumulation of all of their pain. So I'm looking at their faces, but I'm seeing into their emotional life and their psychology and their history. And then I see these two other things. I see their life without me, and their life with me, like lines of futures that aren't determined yet. But I can see in the life without me the increase of their suffering. Like my mom would finally just break, and my dad would just break, and their lives would be forever till the day they died, just this terrible suffering of having lost 2 kids, which I'm sure lots of parents, they know what that is. And then I saw the other track was with them. I live with them, and they don't experience this pain. They still have suffering, but it's not as intense. And then I see their endings. I see their deaths, and I see the particularity of their belovedness, and I see their well-being. So both tracks end in the same place. They end in this place of being beloved and the end of all suffering. In an instant, it's all gone. And I say, and I also see that the length of my life is the wink of an eye. So my 21 years on Earth, they were nothing compared to infinity, over in a wink. And so I say, well, if it's all the same to you, even I'd like to go back and come back. Can I come back here? If I can go back and help my parents, it's not going to be a long time, so I'll go do that. And the voice said, well, it's your time to come home. I said, but if I go back, can I come back here? And the voice said, yes, if you go back, you can come back here. And so I chose to come back. And in the instant of my choosing to come back, I got flicked out like a little pebble off the finger and shot away. And as I went away, the divine stayed with me and spoke to me, but I became more material. And as I became more materialized, I was presented with a million doorways. And all these doorways led to different lives. And in the middle of all these doorways was a beam of light. And this beam of light was greater than all of the doorways, or the end of a fiber optic cable. And there were a million different entry points for me. And all of them were lives I could live. And the voice said to me, choose. But it wanted me to choose the massive white light in the middle. And as I looked at the massive white light in the middle of all these lives, I was like, I think I want a little autonomy. And so I decided that I wanted a little me. And so I chose off to the side of the light, not in the light, but not in the intensity of it, but it also radiated out. So all of these lives, to the edge of these million doors, it got darker and darker as it went. But I chose somewhere close. I wanted to be creative. I wanted to be I wanted to have some bohemian lifestyle. I had all these thoughts, and as I chose them, that was my choice, and that's the route I went.
Talk about a multiverse. Like it's like Doctor Strange. Like there's all these different. So we can get back to it later, but it sounds like there's potentiality for versions of you and all this stuff. Like it's like the multiverse.
It's like the multiverse. That's exactly it. And so as I entered the singular door, I saw, so here's all these potential lives I could have lived. But as I entered the door that I chose, it's not just one singular path. It's all of these choices that lead to all of these probabilities. All these lives are probabilities. They all have these probabilities in them, and they all interconnect. And all the choices that I make from this entry point lead me deeper either into the light or further from the light. And so I saw this one life that I chose, but I saw all of the probabilities of all of the lives that I could live within this confine. So if I start over here in this life, I don't know if I could reach all the way over to here to this million life over here with the choices I'm going to make, but there's a whole lot of them over here, and based on my decision making that creates the life that I live. And all of these, so in my lived experience, I live now, have for decades, with this constant state of deja vu, of seeing my life a flash or a moment before it happens to me. Because I've already seen it, and I've already lived it. And every decision that I make, people say, well, that was meant to be. Well, it is meant to be. It was meant to be because of all the choices that I made and all the choices of all the people around me. So I'm not making these choices independent of all these other people making these choices. So there's all sorts of other factors that come into this complicated thing. where the decisions that I make are based on decisions other people make. And so over my lifetime, since I've come back, and part of my spiritual path has been to not so much try to choose what's right or wrong, although I try to do that like everybody else. Like, it's bad to do this thing and it's good to do that thing. I try to cultivate a space of light inside myself, because it turns out that I should have chosen the light. And so I've been spending my entire life doing that one thing. That's my goal, is to constantly, as frequently as I possibly can, through meditation, Kriya Yoga, Hatha Yoga, learning, education, all these things, but most particularly practice, to try to make the living light a radiance inside me, so that all the choices that I make lead back to it, moment by moment.
And that's like part of it. That's part of the equation. The choice that you made at those crossroads leads you to live this life where you're trying to get back into that, focal radiant light, whatever it is. I'm trying to keep track.
Yeah.
There's a
No,
lot
no,
going
you're
on.
saying it great. You're saying it extraordinarily well.
But I'm just saying that seems like it's all part of one kind of mega equation, and so.
Well, one thing I left out. I see you want to say something, James. Go
I
ahead.
was just gonna. No. You say what you're gonna say, and then I'll jump in.
So when I was dead in heaven, or alive in heaven, I wanted to know. Like, you can ask questions, and so I wanted to know. I think my question was something like, I want to know everything. Like, I want to know how galaxies are made, and how molecules attract, and the evolution of humanity, and I want to know about star systems, and I want to know about galaxies. I want to know absolutely everything, and all of that knowledge in a moment, all of that data was inside of me, to the extent that I could comprehend it, which was a lot more than my brain can grasp, and it was like an equation. It was this super complicated equation. And so when people say to me that was meant to be, like, or that God is reasonable, I'm like, well, if God's reasonable, then I'm unreasonable. I can't comprehend the magnitude of the equation in my brain. It's just way too complex for me. It's way too big for me. Too many factors.
Yep.
And which include, the formation of the galaxy, our little tiny galaxy here.
And make reality work, like make reality possible. And the other thing is, I don't know if we're going to touch on that, if we're going to get to it or not, but we've spoken in the past. We talked to a guy last week where the idea that things are seemingly changing too, and so where does the idea of change or any of this changing along the way? You know what I mean? Like that's the best way I can put it.
What do you mean by change?
Well, as much as a lot of your story points to, like there's a purpose to this whole thing, and almost like a destiny or something like that, or a track this stuff's going on, And when you say equation, it makes you think like it's static, like this is the way it is, right? But we've gotten into some deep discussions about the idea of, maybe even something like the spiritual realm or God or reality itself changing, evolving, growing, whatever,
Or if it's infinite, right? You can't really nail it down to one thing, because it's so vast. You never get to the end of total comprehension of what's actually going on.
Exactly, both of those things.
Yeah.
Well, both of those things, for sure. I heard it put this way as a rabbinic question: is what's the one thing the unlimited can't experience?
Finitude.
Limitedness. And so in the limitedness, so there's this. It creates the unlimited creates unlimited to the unlimited creates limitedness in order to experience it. And how many kinds of limitedness are there? We don't know. A lot.
Yeah. So when this experience kind of came to an end and you bounced back into finite reality, what was that like? What happened?
So I'm traveling down this tunnel, and as I'm being carried, I'm like back inside the angel again. But it's also the divine. It's both of these things at once. And I'm being compressed down like a trash compactor. Like I'm like a plastic milk jug that's squished down into a centimeter square, and or less. And so I feel myself getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and it's uncomfortable. And and I get then kind of screwed into my body, like painfully twisted and stuck back in. And now I'm back inside, and I have no control over this. This is all being done. The whole thing was done to me. I couldn't make any of this, all done to me. And so I'm squished down and twisted into this thing, and then my consciousness re-inhabits my physical form. And as my brain comes back online, my first experience of the world is just suffering, because everything hurts. The whole thing just...
Welcome to Earth. You come back and
Right, and that actually began my long-term, like, you didn't tell me the fine print. I didn't. I was pretty angry for a long time, and so I'm in this body and depressed, and I was in this body. My brain comes back online. I'm feeling all this pain, and I begin to hear sounds. I don't know what sound is, but I hear these. My ears are picking up sound, and pretty soon that kind of resolves into words, and I begin to understand the language. I begin to understand the words, and then my whole form is being moved, and so I'm being moved, and I'm in pain, and I hear my name, and I open my eyes, and I see Tim, who I have no idea who he is. I don't know where I am. I don't know what I am. I do not understand what's going on at all. And he's pulling on me and pulling me up, and he's screaming and yelling, and I start to hear, "You were dead, you were dead. If you died, I was going to die." And he's crying, and he's shouting, and he's all upset, and he gets me to stand up, and he's talking to me, and he's crying, and I'm like, what is this?
Oh.
What is this? Where was I? Who am I? What is going on? And at some point, I became human enough that he said, "Pull the rope," and I pulled the rope, and the rope came free, and we descended. And because the car was across the street, in the parking lot, across the parkway, we got out the tent, and we self-treated. My brain came back online. We self-treated for hypothermia. He had a super fancy tent with a chimney and a vent, so we could fire up the stoves inside the tent and not asphyxiate, because we had a draft. So we fired up both stoves. We warmed up water. We got in our sleeping bag, got naked, got in our sleeping bags, and sipped warm water until we got our temperature up to what I figured was a reasonable enough degree as and now, okay, when you're coming out of frostbite and frozenness, it frickin' hurts.
Oh.
Everything is like
Yeah.
super painful.
Burns.
And it burns.
Can imagine.
And so when we finally get to a place where I thought we were, because Tim's like, "Let's get in the car and turn on the heater." I'm like, "No, we can't do that. We got to do this right. Got to take our time with it. It's got to be slow."
How did things go from so dire to like all the amenities being so close by?
Yeah, how did
I
you
feel
get
like-
out of
Well,
that
'cause
so
it-
fast?
Well, because the car's right across the street.
No, but you had the problem with the rope. You couldn't get the rope on.
Well, well, it wasn't easy. Okay, I skipped over we had to hike out. We had to open up the car. We had to, find the keys, and we had to use our hands, and we had to get the tent out. So this wasn't an instant process.
Yeah.
I told it as if it was. It was a journey of, because our feet are still frozen and our hands are still frozen, but the desire, the drive, and the elation of getting down, and the drive for survival, they were still there. And so over a period of time, I don't even know where we set up the tent. We might have set it up right next to the car. I don't really, maybe we did that. That makes the most sense. I don't think we would have hiked back in. We must have set it up right there. And well, did what we did. When you have to survive, you keep going. So we did this, and then eventually we got in the car and warmed up for a period of time, and now everything's kind of defrosted, and And as we drove the car over to pick up our gear, I guess we had dropped our gear across the street, across the parkway, and we're putting the sun is up, and we're putting everything back in the car. And I'm not saying anything. I know we're still freaked out. We haven't. I don't know. We must have eaten something. I bet we had peanut butter tubes or, dried food or something that we rehydrated, and or we had food. No, we had gone shopping in Jasper the day before. I think we had solid food. I think we had peanut butter and bread and backpackers bread and stuff like that. And the park ranger showed up and asked whether we were the two young fellas on the mountain that night, and we were like, yes, sir. He said, well, I was the guy in the flash that saw you, and I came down to see if we needed to requisition the helicopter to get your bodies.
Oh, oh my gosh.
And that's totally sobered us. And then we got in the car and we drove away, and then the adventure continued. And the short of that end of that story is that we sped through a town. We got arrested. We got put in jail. We had to, pay a fine to get out, which could have been a bribe. I don't really know. And then we nearly hit a car head on, and then we hit a semi head on, and we went under the rear end of the semi and blew the car apart. And neither of us got hurt because we had hit the brakes. The car was totaled.
And you were like, I saw all this coming.
And then, so when we're hitting the semi, we have this experience of my life flashing. I have this experience. Everything slows down. You're talking about time. Time slows way down. And we're kind of rocking on two wheels and rocking back. And pens, I see a pen flying through the air and a cassette tape, and everything's in slow-mo. And then I watch my life from birth to this moment. It's like a movie. And it wasn't a review like I had when I was dead, but it's just like watching a movie of my life. Oh, there's my grandfather, there's my mother, there's my dog, all that, just a movie of my life in this. But it was like I was seeing it inside my head as I was also seeing the cassette tape move in slow-mo. And then, pow, we hit this thing and ruined the car, and Tim's angry. I caused the accident, it's my fault. So I totaled the car. Tim's really angry at me. The truck driver's very upset. We've had enough money that Tim took a bus. We could pay for a bus. He took the skis and the poles, and I took all the climbing gear. And he took all the skis and the poles because I totaled the car. I gave him all my money, and he took a bus back to Bozeman, and I made a sign the next morning, and I hitchhiked back to Montana with a stutter. So now I've got a stutter, and which I never had before. And
was that just from the shock of the entire trip, or
the whole thing? And so then, I lie my way across the border with this professor who picks me up. He's a professor of English, I think, from Missoula, which is another Montana university, state university, and he takes me to Missoula. We lie our way across the border. I'm his stepson from his first wife, with a different name because I was adopted. We had this whole thing planned out. We took the side. We didn't go to the main area for getting across the border. We went to this side little shack with one guy in it who drinks his coffee by himself for 12 hours and to kind of get across easier. And then I left on a theater tour and sign language for it was a 3-month tour. And it just goes on from there. It just keeps going and going and going. I'll finish by this, saying I came back a different person. I started out by talking about mystical experiences. And what happens in a mystical experience, in a deeper form of mystical experience, is that you change. There's after effects. And if it's a visitation from the dead and your after effect is your grief changes, you still love this person, but the depth of your knowledge, you now know this person's not dead. You might not know that about yourself or anybody else, but you know about this one person. And then you live your life through that for the rest of your life. And so that's a new person. That's a new identity. Yeah. And I came back with a new identity. I was not the person I was before. I was in the same body. I had the same physical, benefits and problems, the things I had, my advantages and disadvantages and those things in between. Those didn't change. But the person I was on the inside was totally different. I knew from the very moment I came back that I was living inside this thing. I was inhabiting it like it's like a bio robot. And my software is still in the cloud, and I've got an app inside of this, and my app reads the software, and so I've got a presence inside of this thing, but it's not me, and I live inside this thing, and so my orientation, the whole world is like this. Everybody's walking around like they know who they are, and they don't have any idea. They're all like, everybody's blind, and I was pissed because I came back to this ugliness here because it's super ugly in comparison, and I came back to this isolation and this new perspective and no rule book, no manual, no language, don't know what happened to me, don't know, can't explain it to anybody, don't want to. It took me until today. I'm still reintegrating.
Wow.
I've had major reintegrations along the route, but I'm still learning new things. I'm still adjusting.
That personality change thing, like, I'm with a lot of psychedelics, it can simulate a near-death experience, right? Like you'll go through the cycle of life and see your death and all this stuff. And I've heard it more than once, scientists be like, the fact that people come back from that sort of thing and their identity is different, like just weird scientists out, more than once I've heard them be like, I don't know how to feel about that. Their characters, like their identity is different, after they experience. So I've seen it to a degree, myself, somebody I grew up with, a strong psychedelic experience, and their character was different.
Yeah, well, they had an end of duality experience of oneness, and when that happens, and you realize that you're not this person, unless you. And it's important to have support. It's important to have a way to process that. I didn't have a way to process that. I was alone, and so part of my change was that I was an undergraduate in English, and I decided that English major. Then I was going to go, as a graduate student, I was going to go to architecture and join the family firm. I've been my plan my entire life since I was 7, and I first picked up a pencil at my dad's desk. All the jobs I held had to do with that. It was all about that. And I came back, and I'm like, I'm not doing that. And my parents were like, what are you talking about? And I went to study mysticism. I went to Yale to study mysticism, which is not a degree there. I got a master's of divinity, but the dean of students let me, when I didn't give her any reason why I was doing this, study mysticism. So I studied the history of mysticism and contemplation in order to find if there was anybody else in the history of the world like me, and if there were, what could they tell me about myself and how to live this way? And it turns out there are, and there have been, and there's lots of them. And
thank God for the internet, eh? It probably
there was no internet.
Well, not then, but now.
Oh, now,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's super easy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I can live where I live now and continue my research.
The slightest difference the slightest peculiarity will ostracize you oftentimes in communities and stuff like that, let alone like having this massive sort of secret, or this just giant character changing revelation. It's like that sounds like it would be tough.
It was challenging, and everybody knew. Okay, I never told anybody what happened. So I come back with a stutter. On my journey back, I get picked up by this cowboy, and I get picked up by this cowboy, who I flag down. Okay, so I get left off in Missoula, and I'm stuck there. And it's middle of the night, and there's nobody driving anywhere. And so I literally stepped in front of a pickup truck on the highway, and I flagged this guy down with my flashlight, and he pulled over. So comes some cowboy, and I told him my sob story that I'd been in a car wreck. I didn't tell him what happened to me. I've been up backpacking, and we were in this car wreck, and he's like, okay, let me take you. Takes me into town, and I think it's into Butte. I think it was Butte. Takes me into town, buys me dinner, because I hadn't eaten in like 24 hours. And no, that's not true. I had a piece of pizza. That's not true. We had pizza in Calgary, which was like, I have to eat to make this thing work. I have to that's so weird. Chewing, it was disgusting to me, actually. And then I call my parents. He gave me money for a bus fare from Butte to Bozeman, and money to call my parents. So I call my parents, and I have a stutter, and my mom picks up the phone, and I tell her what's going on with the stutter, and I don't tell her I died. But I realized as a child, because I had these other mystical experiences, that if I told anybody about them, and I had told my mother about my first one, that went badly for me. And I decided a long time ago I was never going to talk about them. And so I never talked about any of the experiences that I had because of what you just said. And so then I lived in the closet. Everybody knew I was an eccentric. I was like eccentric spilling out of me everywhere I went because I was making other decisions. Like, I'm going to walk barefoot every day. Just crazy stuff. And because I had a different point of view. And so years and years and years and years, decades later, maybe 5 years ago, after I told my parents, maybe 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago now, but maybe 5 or 7 years ago, I asked my mom and my dad. My dad is passed away this past year and went home, and I know he's fine because I saw him when he was dead. He's all right. And so, horrible death, though. The dying part was no good, but the death was beautiful. So I say, when I came back that summer, what did you notice about me? They're like, well, you were really, really compassionate. You changed, you just started, you put in a garden for your mother, and then you built the pathway to the bird bath that you installed. And you got out and you got some blueberry bushes, and you planted these blueberry bushes, and they're like, you never did that kind of stuff. You were a good kid, and you were nice to people, but not like this. And that began this whole long life of trying to hide this thing that was roaring inside of me for fear of being institutionalized, frankly. And so
I can understand why you didn't want to come back, for Pete's sake. Where you come back and you're a more compassionate person and people are worried about you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the decisions I was making, I was giving up when I chose not to go to architecture school. I gave up a lot. I mean, I gave up a lot, but I really didn't care. I wasn't interested. I remember the day I made the choice, because my parents were pressuring me. I was out walking my dad asked me to go look over this it must have been a 10-acre lot. And it was full of blueberries and wildflowers and spruce trees and birds, and it was a summer's day, and I was also walking barefoot in this place. So I'm walking, I was surveying this because they were going to put in somebody was putting in a new, like, outdoor mall, and my dad was going to bid on the job. And, a year before, I would have been like, get the measuring tape, let's go out there and survey this thing, and we're going to build this thing. And now I'm like, butterflies and crickets, I can't kill these things. And I went back and I told my dad, and he said, but Pete, he was going to involve me in the project as part of my preparation to go into graduate school. Like, he was like, we've been working this whole thing. I've been working in construction. I've been working as a laborer, building houses and working with the electricians and like this whole thing. And I went back and I told them that I just wasn't going to do it. And they're like, what is going on here, Pete? But I couldn't tell them. I didn't tell anybody for 20 years.
Wow. It's amazing it took so long to be able to, like, free yourself and liberate yourself and be able to spill it. I'm sure it must have been a liberating experience to finally start getting it off your chest, and saying, what you'd experienced, what you felt, and all that stuff. Which I kind of want to fast forward to today, because today you've got so much going on in your life. You do all these talking venues, and you've got your YouTube channel. And believe it or not, I found you by doing a YouTube search on Christian mysticism, which is one of the real reasons I wanted to talk to you, is because a lot of people, they don't have a clue what that is. Like, they get an idea what Christian is, right? Catholic or Protestant. We come from very, fundamentalist Protestant background. Go to church on Sunday, read your Bible study, all that jazz. But the thing that sticks out to you is this experience over beliefs when it comes to you. And I'm sure that has something to do with this Christian mysticism. And I get your side of the mysticism, but where does the Christianity part, how does that fit into your equation here?
Well, when I got back to my university as a different person, I went hunting for knowledge. And in the comparative literature department, which is not the English department, it's a different study. The comparative literature would study, Iranian poetry and South American writers, comparing them. So a different department. It was a big university, and I found a course called Mysticism East and West, and it was I'll show you the book, because I still use this book. So this was one of the course books in it, Mysticism, by a study and an anthology by this guy named F.C. Happold, and this is the book I used, and obviously it's on my desk because it still has value to me, and it explored mysticism in the East and the West. And one day I went into the professor's office because I was looking for guidance. I didn't know who to talk to. And I said, look, I've got this friend, and I've changed the gender. I have this friend, and she had this experience that sounds similar to what these experiences these people had. And she's trying to find a way to deepen her understanding. And she has an interest, and so meanwhile, okay, I'm reading the Upanishads, I read the Vedas, I read Lao Tzu, I read Chuang Tzu. I'm reading all these. That's not the only book of the course. It's, we're exposed to all this stuff, and the transcendentalists and the romantics and all these people who are mystical, deep, historical people who've written mystical books or about mystical books. And I say to him, so, I'm reading the Upanishads and the imagery in the Upanishads, and the truth that's in there reflects the truth that I experienced. Not in the symbolic language, not in the metaphors they used, but in the truths that they express, my experience. And I said to him, what if this friend of mine, she wants to explore this, and she wants to, it's not just an academic exploration, it's spiritual exploration, but also academic. And he said, well, if your friend wants to only be an academic, she could study any of these things. But if she actually wants to be on a path, it might be best to stay on the cultural path of the dominant culture in which you were raised. And that was Christian. And so I thought a lot about this. I'm like, well, they all have mysticism in them. And I wouldn't have to learn Sanskrit or Arabic or Japanese to study Zen or Islam or, the Vedas. I could just study Christianity, and then I could maybe hide inside it. And so it became my cloak. And so I toyed with going to this monastery. So when I was in high school, I went to this Catholic high school. And when I was my senior year of high school, when I took a triple hit of purple microdot mescaline, which is a San Pedro cactus, which is peyote. And I took this 3 times the dose. And I had this divine experience of the I am existing pantheistically inside of all things. And shortly after this experience, my religion teacher went off to this monastery to study for a weekend retreat to learn meditation, based in Theravada Buddhism and Christian mysticism, called centering prayer practice. That's what it's called now. And taught it to us, and I took to it immediately. So I started toying with the idea of going to the monastery where I knew these monks were practicing this deep practice. But I really liked sex. I liked that big O, and I didn't want to quite give it up in my 20s. So I decided to go to divinity school to study mysticism. And I was going to go get my graduate degree. I wanted to get my doctorate in East-West Studies. I was going to go back to East-West Studies of mysticism. But the dean of students, who allowed me this 3-year study, independent study of mysticism across the university, and actually found money to bring in a professor for me. So I had like a private professor that she found university money for. Plus, I got to take classes around the university under her tutelage. She talked me into becoming a minister. So she talked me into trying out. You guys have the United Church of Canada. Its twin sister in the United States, maybe kissing cousin, is the United Church of Christ, her denomination.
Okay.
Progressive denomination, ordained women, or eventually ordained gays, social justice oriented. I've been working in homeless shelters, helping resettle refugees, doing very humanitarian work. And I was like, well, I'll give it a 3-year try. And then we got pregnant, and I had to have a job, and we had a baby, and so I'm like, I got to stay as a minister, and I had to give up my dream to get my doctorate, which is fine. It all worked out. But I figured I could hide inside the church, and here's the reason why. Because I was an English major, I read Emerson and Thoreau in the United States, and I read Blake and Wordsworth and Coleridge from England, and all these guys, they all went to divinity school. They all had divine degrees, and they all were transcendentalists. And I figured that I could put I could use my divinity degree and to pursue my mystical life in plain sight, and nobody would know. And that's what I did. And so I had studied with in the school of Marcel Marceau in his mime school. When I got back to my university, when I was touring in this company, I was touring as a mime. And so, because it was an American Sign Language company for the deaf, university-based. And so I continued studying mime, where I learned yoga, and I read Paramahansa Yogananda, Autobiography of a Yogi, and I read the Yoga Sutras, and they both talk about Kriya Yoga, and I incorporated a Kriya Yoga practice into my Hatha Yoga practice, and combined that with my centering prayer practice, and it developed an interior root for myself. And so as a minister, I would meditate. I taught meditation, and I meditated every day, and it was part of in my contract, Peter has time to do meditation every day or yoga.
That's all right.
But they didn't know.
Perfect.
Well, I know, it was very progressive. And so, and then because of the internet, I was able to read all the Gnostic Gospels. I was able to read all the Nag Hammadi texts and all the non-canonical works. I got to read so I just kept reading and reading and reading and studying and studying and studying, and not so much incorporating it into my pulpit work, because people didn't want to hear about the Gospel of Thomas and the sayings of Buddha. They just wanted to hear about the 4 Gospels. But I can weave it in here, I can weave it in there. And so I did, and small doses.
Sorry, again.
That's all right. Keep
going.
going.
Punchy here. Cool. But the Gospel of Thomas, that's valid. That's valid scripture, or?
Well, the Gospel of Thomas is heterodox according to Christianity, which means that it's opposed to orthodoxy. But it is the most mystical gospel. Oh, the Gospel of Thomas is awesome. It's mystical literature. So here's the thing that's totally missed in Christianity. This is my scholarly opinion, that Jesus spoke in metaphor and nobody understood that.
Yeah.
All mystics in every religion in the world, they only speak in metaphor and or symbol.
That's hey Jesus, what happens when we die? You'll be like the angels.
Yes, exactly.
And then people are like, "Oh, we're going to be exactly like angels."
Wings.
Yeah. And so it's frustrating, but whatever. I mean, hey, teach their own. Maybe I don't know. Maybe we are like angels, but sorry, go on.
Yeah.
Well, we are. That's what I experienced. It's just not, the stone ones in front of the Vatican. It's an energetic form of consciousness, an extension of the divine self. And so I went this route, and I hit it, and as a result of it, so because I'm an eccentric, I was in all these crazy positions in the church, like embezzlements, murders, shootouts, like extreme violence. And I'm in the middle of all these crazy things, And because I'm a near-death experiencer, I know you can't kill me. So I'm sort of invincible in that way. You can hurt me, but you can't kill me. And so I made a lot of decisions. I was assigned, you could say, or hired by churches that were extremely sick. And my job was to help them get well. And it came at a lot of cost to me and my family. But that was my job in the midst of all these other things.
Talk about, like, tough job. You know what I mean? Like, I've seen enough churches to know that...
Enough dysfunction.
Oh,
like,
they're
most
brutal.
churches got some dysfunction, but to go to one that's specifically messed up is like... The power
You
of
want
Christ
to know
compels
how
you.
messed up?
Yeah.
You want to know how... Okay,
I don't
this is how
want to
messed
know.
up.
No, you should probably say.
In short, this church sat on the sidewalk on this corner. This is back in the it's built in the 1700s, the early 1800s, and so for all these years, horse carts going by, it was totally fine. But as soon as they paved the road, cars started hitting it, and so finally this car hit it, and during church service, and they decided to lift the church up and move it back 30 feet, and it cost a lot of money, and so this group organized to do that. And then there was fiscal malfeasance. That's the term that was used. A lot of money, they're not sure what happened to it and where it went. And by the time I arrived there, the church has been sitting in this new place for 2 or 3 years. And these people are now in charge of the trustees. And they hire a treasurer who they also let be the financial secretary. And because they're afraid that anybody's going to, like, find out their fiscal malfeasance, be able to prove anything, when money started to go missing from the trust, from this treasurer and the secretary, they turned a blind eye for 10 years. Oh. And so I get there, I show up, and the interim minister says to me, the only thing I'm going to tell you about this place is there's something wrong here and I don't know what it is and it's really bad. I'm like, oh, great. And so...
Well, like, by the way, I just feel like I should say, like, when I'm saying, you know, for you to have to go to a particularly messed up church, what I mean by that is, within the Christian faith, like, at the base of it is like a confession of your sins and a knocking in the door being open. So, like, these are people that are oftentimes coming, like, admitting that they're sinners and they need salvation. So, like, you're not, you know, that's where we're starting, right? Is people congregating that are admitting that they are incomplete and need a greater power to help them. I'm not trying to judge any church or something like that.
No, you're totally right. You're totally right.
But to go into one that's, like, messed up, you know?
Well, I didn't know how messed up it was until well, I resigned 9 weeks later.
Yeah.
And then the one of the hiring committee came, because something happened. I could tell you all the details, but something happened, like, this place is effed up. This is, like, serious. It's got nothing to do with me. I don't need to stay here. We can get out of here. And
I'm not actually Christ.
Oh my God, it was terrible. And so then I resigned again. They talked me to stay, and 18 weeks later, I resigned again. A formal letter. And they're like, no, we need you to stay here. There's something really wrong here. And then, so I arrive in, like, September, and by Christmas, I've already resigned twice. Like, right? So, or just after, I think I resigned again after Christmas, because on Christmas Eve, as I walked into the church, it's packed, there's 325 people there, people standing, you know, it's all decorated, it's New England, there's snow falling, and the deacon leans into me as I walk in the door to my first Christmas Eve service. Everybody wants to check me out. And she says to me, "We're going to fire you at the first of the year." And so then, a week later, I get called to this meeting off campus, and it's one of the former executives from ExxonMobil, a former CIA operative behind the lines, international commodities broker, and a well-known attorney who's currently in prison for embezzlement. But at the time, nobody knew. So they called me to this meeting off campus, and the first thing the spy says to me is, "If you ever say this meeting happens, we're all going to deny it, and you're going to look like a fool. This meeting never happened." And then they sit me down and they say, "We want you out of here. We're gonna move to get you out of here. You can resign, or we can move to get you out of here, but it's going to happen." And so this is when I write my second letter of resignation. I'm like, I'm out of this freaking place. But they come to me, the other people are like, there's a problem here, we want you to stay. And so I stay. And eventually we discover what's going on. And then they try to silence me, and then they try to ruin me. They embarrass me in public. They try to destroy my career, try to strip my ordination from me. It gets really bloody bad over a long period of time.
Do you discuss all this stuff on your? I haven't had a chance to see everything on your channel. Like, is all of this gone over? No. So
not much, but there is a book about it. There's a book, somebody, after all this is done, so when it's all over, we solve the crime. We're like sleuths. We solve the crime. We prosecute the person. I try to bring her back into the church again. I try to do restorative justice with her, but the church will have none of that. But the people, the perpetrators, the four couples that were behind all of this, they walk out there and they never come back. So the church has an opportunity to heal. And actually, they had power positions at the hospital, at the library, at the yacht club. I live in a resort town. And at the YMCA, they're like poisoning everything in town. And now we cut off the head, and the beast Hydra dies. And so now there's no more. The poison goes away. The whole town so it's a really good thing all the way around. The church heals, and then they write a book about the history of the church. And in the book about the history of the church, there's a chapter on it. It's at Amazon, and so I go into detail there. But I've never really talked about it in a video interview. It's brutal and it's detailed. And in the middle of it, there's all sorts of other stuff that happens. All sorts of, like, I worked a lot with domestic violence. There's a lot of domestic violence, and like intimately up front it was exhausting. My poor wife. What a drama. The whole thing was just drama after drama after drama.
So your wife is like an angel then too?
She's like an angel.
I've got one of them.
She's like an angel. And then I got recruited into television, and I spent 15 years with the TV show with no drama at all. And it was quiet, and it was spiritual, and then that ended when New Corporation purchased the TV station, and then I started this YouTube channel and this counseling service that I run. And I teach meditation, and I Kriya yoga, I teach Kriya and meditation, and I deconstruct Thomas. We're in the midst of deconstructing Thomas.
Yeah, I've noticed that on your channel.
The lens of near-death experience. It's the 114. Am I going to do it for 114 weeks? I don't know yet, but I might. I'm on 20.
Yeah. What I want to ask you was your story. Actually, I think brings a lot of. Your story seems to bring a lot of hope to people. It's when I heard it, it even got me choked up a little inside. There's something there that really resonates. I was wondering, with your YouTube channel, it's called Not Church, right?
Well, it's called Peter Panagore, but I branded it as Not Church. So the Sunday morning show is Not Church, but the channel's name is my name.
Yeah. Do you have an overarching message that you want to give to people beyond your story? And if so, what is it?
It's love.
Yeah.
Love thy neighbor as thyself, and love God above all things. That's it. So when I was in TV, I wrote and produced 1,400 scripts. And all of them had one subject. There's 1,400 stories, but every one of them was about love and hope. That death does not kill you, and that love is the lens through which it's the treasure of life. It's the treasure of heaven. And if you don't have love in your life, it could be a puppy dog. You can love a cat. You can have a cat love you. You can love gardening. It's not this thing that is, it's this thing that is, there's so many types of love in the world. Everybody's love for everybody else is different than, it's as individual, love is as individuals are. And so that is the one thing that for you, we have one word for that is indefinable but experiential, and everybody has it, or has the opportunity for it, or the chance for it. So the message is, the treasure is love, here and there. And if you don't want to live a spiritual life, because so many of my friends are atheists, but they're among the kindest, most loving people I know, the most human people I know.
Yeah.
It's not about belief. It's about, well, it's about love.
Yeah. In my studies with this channel and Justin here being alongside me, it's amazing how it seems to keep coming back to that. This message of love, and also how miserable the job as humans we can sometimes be at. Showing love. I think it's good that we are getting this message.
Well, that's why I said to the other Peter, I was like, is there some kind of counter force going on here? Because, most people, like, we want love, like, ostensibly people are like, you want to be loving, have the capacity to love, but it seems to be awfully difficult to avoid petty human nature, petty human competition, petty human jealousy.
There's
list
an answer.
that we all know.
There's an answer for that. Jesus gave it. In the Gospel of Luke, in the King James Version, he said, make your eyes single and your body will be filled with light. And that is the key to all of it. And so the life of prayer isn't a life of asking for things. God, give me Mercedes-Benz, heal my child, fix my leg. It's about learning selflessness again and again and again. And when human beings, or as I heard it said today in Christian language, was what was the language? It was about kill the material man, the death of the material man, the death of the material self. Was some Christian was talking about that language to me today. It's the egoic mind of selfishness that's the root of everything, all the problems.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
ego.
because we don't see our own humanity. It's ego, and we don't. It's the egoic mind is a function of the brain. We need it to survive as human beings. You have to, if you're going to kill, if the mastodon's going to kill you, and you're hungry, you got to kill the mastodon. You got to work with your tribe to make that happen.
Great tool, terrible
and
master.
So you got to have an egoic mind. What? Great, right, exactly.
Great tool, terrible master. Like, I heard, I don't know if you know who Osho is, but he once, I heard him put it pretty eloquently, and he was actually talking about, like, somebody was like, well, what happens if you're in the middle of a battle or something, and you've got to, you're required to kill, and I'm not going to be able to say what he said, but it was along the lines of, the way he put it was if you're in the right place, if you have, you're not tied down by ego, even if you are required to be some kind of warrior, you're going to be able to do that with love. You're going to be able to even engage in that in a loving way. It was something along the lines of that, and he put it eloquently, but, I can't. But I guess that's where trust comes in, in leaning into love and trying to be selfless as much as you can and transcend the petty ego.
Meditation helps. Meditation helps.
Meditation helps. Okay, that's good.
Yeah. Well, we've been killing it for a long time here. I don't know if you've noticed, but the sun's set behind us, and now we're swimming. We're swimming under the sea with the blue lights in the background. It's kind of funny, but I just wanted to say thank you so much, Peter, for coming on this show and telling us your story. I know people are going to watch this and they're going to be moved by it the same way I have. And it's definitely something worth contemplating. I'm going to leave all the links for your stuff down in our description box so people can find you. But as just a last word, is there anything you got going on that you can let people know about that can kind of steer people towards what you're doing? Now's the time. Let us have it.
Go to peterpanagore.love. peterpanagore.love.
Okay.
All the links are there. I've got teach meditation 3 days a week live on YouTube, and do a live show on Sunday where we're deconstructing Thomas. We have a Mystic Tea Salon following Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. A Mystic Tea Salon is a global group of people who've had mystical experiences, some near death, some other kind of mystical experiences, where we talk about it. And it's a crowdsourcing wisdom is what it is. And the other thing is I'm working hard. I sold my book to, it's been optioned for a movie. I've been working on it for 2 years, working closely with producers, and it's going great right now. So that's underway. But peterpanagore.love, I've got a whole bunch of bugs in the studio. There's all sorts of flies flying around. peterpanagore.love, and I do counseling. So if you want to have a conversation, consulting on spirituality, or counseling around mysticism, or I was a pastor for 20 years or longer. Still a pastor technically. Do that too.
All right. Well, Thank you so much, everyone. I want to, if you're watching this show, thanks for watching. All our stuff will also be in the links in the description. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, share this with a friend, and everybody, until next time, stay spiritual.